Coming up on today's Locked On Dodgers, a series loss against the Guardians. We'll get into that, but most importantly, a loss of Mookie Betts for at least a couple weeks. And what are they going to do in the outfield? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Andrew Heaney's return, and unfortunately, talk about Craig Kimbrel, not in a positive sense. So that's what's on tap. So make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, more odds, and more lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you for joining us here at Locked On Dodgers. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Make it easy on yourself and better for us by subscribing in all those places so you'll never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Ben Samperio. This is my co-host, Jeff Snider, and we are both lifelong Dodger fans. But we both spent some time covering the team in different capacities in the locker room, in the press box, and writing about them. But we're here together talking about the Dodgers every single weekday morning. And that's what we're here to do today, Jeff. So let's talk Dodgers series loss against the Guardians. No, not great offense. Did put up 7 runs on Saturday, but still struggled to hit with runners in scoring position throughout the whole weekend. The Dodgers, lost 2 out of 3, but I think the biggest loss of the weekend comes in the form of Mookie Betts, who was found to have a cracked rib and will be out at least 2 weeks. They put him on the IL. He said it hopefully would take him just 2 weeks to get back, but remains to be seen. But either way, this leaves a big hole not only in the Dodgers lineup, but also in the outfield.
Yeah, and we saw that hole in the outfield come into play on Sunday's game. Eddie Alvarez got thrown out there a couple times this weekend, and it didn't work out so well on Sunday. The sun was bad, but you have to think that a more experienced right fielder probably makes, definitely the play that Alvarez got an error on, and probably the double in the 9th inning. And you think about that 9th inning, Kimbrough came very close to getting a strikeout looking on the full count pitch for the second out, and then the next guy hits that blooper. It was like very close to 1-2-3 inning. Instead, it was a ridiculous 2-run inning for the Guardians that the wheels just came off. And I don't know what the answer is, but I think we probably all agree it's probably not Eddie Alvarez. I think I'm maybe a little bit more charitable towards him than some people I've been seeing. He's very athletic, obviously, and I think he probably would get better out there. But the Dodgers aren't really a team that's in a position of putting a guy out there to learn how to play right field,
Yeah, exactly. Especially, they're not by any means ahead. They're not only losing ground or not losing ground, but not only, not gaining ground like they could have been this weekend in the NL West, but just in general, the Braves hot streak has them near the Dodgers in terms of winning percentage. And, you start thinking about seeding as the season goes on, and still a long time left, still 90 some games left. But now you got 2 weeks, and currently the Dodgers have 2 designated outfielders on the roster, and one of those being Chris Taylor, who is also an infielder. So technically, and I guess Cody Bellinger is also an infielder. He can play first base. So, but either way, 2 designated outfilders on the roster right now. You got Gavin Lux, who can play outfield, Zach McKinstry, who can play outfield, and Eddie Alvarez, I guess, who can play outfield technically, but maybe not as great as a B. So now it looks like they need an outfielder to come up, and with no news regarding the date being pushed back, that it looks like that the Dodgers will have to drop a pitcher, go down to 13 pitchers, which means another position player will have to come up. And I don't know, Jeff, you look at the 40-man roster, and the only other designated outfielder on the 40-man roster that's not hurt is James Outman, who's currently in Double-A. I don't think we'll be seeing him. What are the options the Dodgers have? Who are we going to see that can come up and help out on a regular basis for the next 2 weeks and be able to play the outfield?
Yeah, bottom line is there's not really any help on the 40-man roster. I'll backtrack that in a second a little bit because there's one that I'll throw out there as a outlandish possibility, but realistically, we're probably looking at somebody who's not on the 40-man roster, either somebody who's in the organization and just not on the 40-man, or somebody outside the organization, whether it's a trade or, I've seen a lot of people talking about Lorenzo Cain, who the Brewers DFA'd. But I mean, the Brewers DFA'd him with his blessing because he's not very good anymore, and he feels like he's coming to the end of his rope as a major league player. And so I don't know if Kane would even be interested in coming. I think he could hold down right field, but I don't think he would answer many people's prayers as far as filling the hole that Mookie Betts leaves offensively. And so what we're looking at is really either Jake Lamb or Jason Martin, probably. Jake Lamb is not an outfielder. They have played him some in the outfield, but I don't think that's it. But if they called up Jake Lamb, who is tearing it up in AAA, and say, okay, JT, Justin Turner, you are our everyday DH. Be funny to have Justin Turner be the designated hitter in the year that he doesn't know how to hit, but if he's going to play, that's okay. Say Turner's our designated hitter, Max Muncy is our everyday second baseman, Jake Lamb's our everyday third baseman, Gavin Lux is our everyday left fielder, and then whether it's Chris Taylor in center and Cody Bellinger in right, or flip flop those, that's a decent setup. And the one concern I would have about Jake Lamb is being an everyday player in his career. He has a 798 OPS against righties and a 595 OPS against lefties. But the one thing we know about Jake Lamb is that he did revamp his entire approach and swing and everything coming into this season. And if you look at his minor league splits this year, he has a 921 OPS against righties and a 1237 OPS against lefties. Obviously, not as many at bats against lefties, only 39 plate appearances compared to 216 against righties. But 3 of his home runs have come. He has 3 homers and 2 doubles in those 39 plate appearances. He's batting 406, taking a bunch of walks. Like, it looks like there's at least a possibility that Jake Lamb has figured out how to hit lefties, and so he could hold down third base. And that's not a terrible idea. They'd have to make a 40-man roster spot for any of these guys we're talking about. But whether it's putting Buehler on the 60-day IL or saying, David Price, thanks for the memories, there's a 40-man roster spot to be had. And I don't hate the Jake Lamb idea.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, that seems like logical. Kevin Pillar was the first one of those two that we've talked about a lot heading into the season and during the season. But Pillar got hurt, and now they're down. I do think it was interesting, like you mentioned, how they would set up center and right field. Dave Roberts mentioned that he didn't get Taylor out there because he's not as comfortable out there, which to me makes more sense to have Bellinger in right and Taylor in center if that was your concern, or if that was a concern. Even if you lose half a step in center with Chris Taylor, you still have above average center fielder, above average right fielder. Whereas if you have Cody in center and Taylor or someone else in right, now you're compromising right field a little bit. Now Taylor could handle it. He did make diving catch the other night, but playing in right field, he'd adjust probably better than anybody else. But I do think it's you got to solidify the outfield defense as much as possible, just because they have so many infielders. Lamb also makes sense in the sense of, if they don't want to give him the everyday role, if they want to kind of mix and match, you can make Muncy your everyday third baseman. You can maybe try Lamb in left field, or Lamb in left or at third, Muncy at second or at third, and then Hanser and Eddie Alvarez and whoever else, McKinstry, rotating in and out as possible. But yeah, it's not great. It's not like, oh my God, the Dodgers are in desperate need or in dire straits, but it is one of those where the depth's getting tested here, with Pillar already being out as the guy that was supposed to be the backup outfielder if somebody got hurt, and now Mookie being out for a couple weeks.
Yeah, and then there's Jason Martin, who, you know what? Maybe we should talk about Jason Martin in the next segment, huh? It's time for you to read an ad.
It is time for me to read an ad, and I'm talking about Athletic Greens. And Athletic Greens, this is one I can speak from personally because they are a good They are good partners, and they sent us some athletic greens, and I actually still have some running out though. But it's a what is athletic greens? Well, it's something. It's a scoop. It's a scoop. It's called AG1, and it has 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens. Help start your day right. You throw it in a glass of water. You throw it in a protein shake. You throw it in a regular shake. You throw it in your coffee, I guess, if you really wanted to throw it in somewhere before you do anything else and get your day started right. What does it help with? Help can help with a bunch of things: gut health, and your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, your focus, and aging, which is all things people want to help out with. What is the importance of a multivitamin? Well, some people take multivitamins to get all these ingredients that your body can absorb and handle and help yourself get better. You don't need a bunch of multivitamins. You don't need to do all that kind of stuff. You just need to put one scoop of AG1 in whatever drink you're doing to start your day, and you'll be right for the rest of the day. And right now, to make it easy, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1 year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is go to athleticgreens.com/MLB network. That's athleticgreens.com/MLB network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, Jeff, back at it. And yeah, you were talking about Jason Martin. Jason Martin is more of a legitimate outfielder in the sense of defensively, but he's. Oh, you'll talk about it. Offensively. Where can he fit in, and how does he stand up?
Yeah, like Jake Lamb, Jason Martin hits left-handed, but also like their stats are almost identical. It's uncanny. Their their minor league stats this year. Martin has a 959 OPS, and Lamb has a 969 OPS. Their batting average is almost identical. Lamb's on base percentage is a little bit better. Martin's slugging percentage is a little bit better. And even when you look at their splits against righties and lefties, even though they're both left-handed hitters, they are both in the 900s of OPS against righties. 926 and 921, almost identical. And then Lamb 1237 OPS against lefties, and Martin 1126 against lefties. So who knows how real that is, but you could definitely make almost the same exact case for Martin that you're making for Lamb, except Martin actually plays outfield, so he fits in more directly. Lamb is more of a veteran presence, and there's a little more evidence behind because he actually did make a swing change. You might be more inclined to believe that his success against lefties is more real. But I mean, you could flip a coin on those two, and the coin might land on its edge and say, "Hey, why don't you send one of the other guys down and call up both of these guys?" You're on mute.
And it's a matter of also, if Mookie does take just the 2 weeks, like you mentioned, comes back in 2 weeks, I guess, essentially an audition for Lamb if you do bring him up, because, they'd be able to do something with Eddie Alvarez or Zach McKinstry if need be, if that was the case, if, Lamb comes up and does really well. So it's also a matter of, do you prioritize Lamb or Martin? Let's just say they do come up 2 weeks, they don't quite impress. You don't necessarily want to lose them. Which one, I guess, is you want to lose less might be the question between them two. But I would imagine it's got to come down to them two, or, I guess Lorenzo Cain could be a call, but it's also one where, again, we could be calling you just to come for 2 weeks and that's it. And I don't think that's something he'd want to do at this point, unless he's like, okay, maybe I go prove myself for 2 weeks and find my way on the roster for the rest of the way. But I don't see that happening.
Yeah, no, Kane seemed kind of resigned to his career coming to an end. He and the Brewers kind of worked it out, so they DFA'd him on the day he hit 10 years of service, so he gets his full pension from the union and all that. So seems like he's pretty comfortable with his career coming to an end. And those two guys, Martin and Lamb, I'm inclined to go with Lamb, even though he doesn't actually play the outfield. I feel like they can move enough guys around, but Martin wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah. Let's move on. I mean, that wasn't entirely negative other than Mookie being hurt, but let's move on to some positive things from the weekend. Even though the Dodgers lost on Sunday, there was a positive outing from a starting pitcher, that starting pitcher being Andrew Heaney. He did allow his first earned run and run of the season. His ERA still sits at 0.59, though. He went 5+ innings, 7 strikeouts. Alvarez didn't help him out in the first inning for the unearned run. He gave up a solo home run to start the sixth inning. But from what we've seen in the minors in his rehab assignment and from what we saw on Sunday, good stuff from Andrew Heaney, and good to see, especially with the loss of Walker Buehler that we've talked about endlessly the last week or so.
Yeah, Heaney looked really good, and great to have him back. And basically picked up, and the Dodgers really starting pitching in this series against the Guardians was outstanding. All three starters looked great, and really it was not doing their job somewhat, and the bullpen job somewhat, and then obviously the right field situation. But Andrew Heaney, the Dodgers 5-starter right now. Tyler Anderson's starter right now, and he almost threw a no-hitter last time. We spent a whole episode talking about him. It's crazy how, with losing Buehler and still having what they have at starting pitching.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, the big talk as we get closer to the deadline here in the next 6-7 weeks, however long it is, will be a starting pitcher for the Dodgers, but not necessarily for the regular season. It's going to be more for, that October push that, let's just say you're not going to have Buehler, or you can't count on Buehler. You want to have, a one or two up there to start a series or whatever the case is. That's what it is. But if they do, go after a starter, yeah, it slots in. He has to slot in at one or two. They could still go in theory with the 6-man rotation, although 6-man rotation, everything has to go right. But either way, regardless of all that, Andrew Heaney looked good. The rotation's full again, and yeah, if the Dodgers can just get the offense going, I think they'd be in a pretty good spot, or better than they already are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I still think a 6-man rotation is a good idea. If they were to add a starter, add a guy who they're counting on for October, and because everybody, Julio had had an extra day of rest this time, looked really good. Obviously Clayton Kershaw can use the extra day of rest. All these guys have different reasons why they could use an extra day of rest every time through the order. So, add a great pitcher and go to a 6-man rotation. I have no issues with that.
Yeah. All right, Jeff. Anything else from the pitching side, or any other positive from the weekend? Because if not, we're gonna have to move on to a little bit of a negative.
Yeah, unfortunately, we could spend a whole episode talking about how good all three starters were this weekend, but that's what you do when the Dodgers win a series, and they lost this series, and so yeah, we do got to talk about some of the negatives.
Yeah, but before we talk about a negative, let's talk about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. They have all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Check out the podcast on there too. You can find all the Locked On podcasts there on betonline.net. They are the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. They got all the scores, all the podcasts, all the news. It's all right there. So head to betonline.net on your laptop or mobile device to learn all about the trends and learn all about the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Jeff. So unfortunately, Craig Kimbrel is turning into the Kenley. Well, he's worse than Kenley Jansen, but he's now starting to get the Kenley Jansen treatment by the fans. And like I said, significantly worse than Jansen was last year. And basically, someone we're going to have to talk about every single outing until he either rights the ship or he pitches it off the roster, maybe.
Yeah, at this point, it's not Kenley Jansen we're comparing him to. It's Joe Kelly. It's a guy with really good stuff who is really, really struggling, and you can't count on for a clean inning. Now, the good news about that is Joe Kelly put together some really, really good stretches for the Dodgers because that good stuff really is. And Kimbrel doesn't quite have the I have no idea where the ball's going element that Joe Kelly had, even though the end result is the same. But, Craig Kimbrel has great stuff, and I really, really do believe that stuff is going to continue to play. I think it was Plunkett had a headline that said the Dodgers replaced Kenley Jansen with a proven closer, but instead they replaced him with the same thing, a closer who's not what he used to be or something. And Craig Kimbrel's stuff, it's not as good as it was when he was at his very peak, but it's still plenty good to be successful. And like I said, even this outing on Sunday, it was very, very close to being strikeout, fly out to end the game, or not end the game. It was still a tie game, but send it to the bottom of the ninth in a tie, and it wasn't. And then he didn't shut things down from there. But I don't think he's that far off. But right now, what we need to see is him actually getting the job done, and that's not happening right now. It's not, and until it does, until we see that 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row, I think people are rightfully going to be really nervous every time he comes in, and kind of hoping for, what the Dodgers need. And this is another reason the offense needs to step up is Craig Kimbrel needs a lot of three-run leads to protect for the next few weeks so that he can get whatever worked out. And even if he gives up a run or two here and there, he still gets his saves, still gets his time in. But the offense needs to give them some big leads. And even, okay, Kimbrel, today you're pitching in a 5-run lead. But the key to that is for the offense to give us some of those leads. And the offense the last few weeks has not been giving very many 5-run leads.
Where it compares to Jansen, at least right now, is the conversations around it in terms of, Jansen, a lot of times last year we talked about these innings where, it wasn't all his fault, some bloopers, maybe a misplay in air, whatever it was. But at the end of the day, we said, well, we want results, and, the results aren't there. That's where Kimbrough's at. I mean, even the last week when he was, the results weren't quite what we wanted, but the results of his pitches were. Like, we're talking about how good the stuff looked. It just feels like the same conversation, but with the different, same first letter of the name as well. But where it's different where it's different, at least in the sense of this year, is I think the Dodgers, obviously not right now, but at some point, if this continued over another 2 months, I think they'd cut bait if need be. They don't have the loyalty to Kimbrough that they did to Jansen. He's on the last year of his contract. And, at that point, if everything goes right, they're getting Dustin May back and they're getting Danny Duffy back. So 2 arms that can pitch. Dustin May probably more so of a late inning guy, but Danny Duffy a guy that can kind of bridge some gaps in there as well. So, I think it's a matter of that's where it's at. That's where it's different. But obviously on our end, we see it. He's still throwing gas. He still has a spike curve that's pretty nasty. He just hasn't put it together yet. The Dodgers are going to give him the chance to put that together. Like I said, he's going to have a little bit longer leash than maybe fans would want him to have. But I do think the leash is one that can be cut, where last year, even though we had talked about it, I don't think they ever thought about, cutting bait with Jansen, even in the last year of his contract.
Yeah, and one guy you didn't mention who's coming back also is Blake Trinan, hopefully coming back in September. If you have a bullpen that has Yancy Almonte and Brusdar Graterol and Daniel Hudson and Blake Trinan and Dustin May, I mean, Kimbrel has to show that he belongs, especially, if they go to a 6-man rotation. I mean, you've almost filled that up, and we haven't even talked about Alex Vesia and Phil Bickford and some of these other guys, Reyes Maranta, guys who can definitely contribute to this bullpen. And so, like you said, the loyalty thing isn't there, which is a good thing. They don't have to worry about hurting Kimbrel's feelings. They traded AJ Pollock for Craig Kimbrel. That hurt some people's feelings. For me, they sold somewhat high on Pollock, and was probably a good call. But Kimbrel needs to make this work. And another way that's similar to Kenley is Dave Roberts' responses to the media, asking questions about it. He basically just said, Kimbrel's our closer, and I think that's the right answer right now. I think, the best version of this Dodgers bullpen probably has a dominant Craig Kimbrel at closer, because then everybody else moves back in. And imagine in the postseason, if you do have a dominant Kimbrel and a healthy and dominant Trinan and Hudson and May and Graterol and all these guys, it's like, okay, we only need our starters to go 4 innings, 5 innings maybe, and we can really get it done. And so that's the best version of this team. And yeah, it would be nice if the offense was making this easier because, if the offense scores more runs this weekend, the Dodgers would have a 2.5 game lead on the Padres right now and a little bit more breathing room. And as it is, they're only up by half a game. And I guess maybe we'll talk at the end about Manny Machado's injury, so maybe that gives them some hope. But bottom line is the offense needs to score so that Craig Kimbrel can be put in situations where he can figure crap out without putting the Dodgers season at risk.
Yeah, I mean that's really what it comes down to, and that's like I said, exact same conversation, just different name. But in the end, the sentiment's a little different in terms of the Dodgers side. So we'll see what happens. We're rooting for, we want Kimbrough to be good because, like you said, it makes everybody else stay in a role where they can be dominant, and the Dodgers can shorten games as much as they need to. But yeah, I mean, we were going to talk about extra innings, but maybe let's save that for tomorrow when we have a full episode with no game. So yeah, let's talk about Manny Machado. We'll talk about, I guess, the Padres. The Padres are right there behind the Dodgers. Giants are also right there. But Padres first last week or early this past week, it was said that Fernando Tatis Jr. was going to miss more time than originally expected. That's not quite healing. His wrist isn't healing like they expected. So it's that. And then on Sunday, Manny Machado sprained his ankle. Maybe we'll have to be out at least a couple weeks, maybe more, depending how that ankle heals and everything else. Sprained ankles are you don't really know what it is. So, unfortunately, it's not one of those where you're rooting for injuries or anything like that. But the injuries are there. And it's one of those where the Dodgers need to take advantage, and the offense can get going, winning more games, get out of this little funk they're in, and really kind of try to take charge of the division. And also the other part of it is the Dodgers play the Padres at the end of the month in less than those 2 weeks that Machado would probably miss. So at the very least, you got to win those games when they come to Los Angeles at the end of the month.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the Padres this year, I mean, offensively, they have some guys having solid years, but Manny Machado is head and shoulders above the rest of them. Like, you look at OPS plus, they've got Luke Voigt's having a solid year, 120 at OPS plus, Cronenworth 121, Profar 121, Hosmer 116. All that's gone way down the last month or so, month and a half. But Machado's at 174. Machado is essentially carrying this team offensively. And then the other thing carrying the team is their pitching has been really good. Not like Dodgers good, but their starting pitching has been solid. Joe Musgrove's been outstanding, and several other guys have been solid. And then their bullpen has been pretty darn good. I will never understand how Nabil Krismet ever gets an out in the major leagues, let alone has a 1.39 ERA through 32 innings in the big leagues. But I mean, he's been really good. They've got, that's what's carrying them. But the loss of Manny Machado is really, really big for this team because, especially with no Tatis, I mean, he drives that offense. And the Dodgers losing Mookie Betts for me isn't nearly as big a deal as the Padres losing Manny Machado because Betts has been probably the Dodgers' best hitter overall this year, but not in a way that that Machado has clearly been for the Padres. So it's you obviously never celebrate anybody's injury. You ideally the Dodgers would beat every other team at full strength. All the teams would be at full strength, and just go head to head like the Clash of the Titans. But this is an opportunity that the Dodgers, since Machado is hurt, it's an opportunity the Dodgers really need to capitalize on. It would be a really good time for the Dodgers offense to wake up because you have to think that the Padres are going to slump at least a little bit at this point without Machado.
And then, I mean, Machado going out, the Padres don't have a Trey Turner waiting in the wings like the Dodgers do, Mookie Betts out. The other one is they don't have a Freddie Freeman right there waiting. And one quick positive is Freddie Freeman hit a home run. He hadn't hit one in a while, and hopefully that's, we say this a lot with the hope, but hopefully that's something that gets him going offensively and can, spark a little power surge and hot streak to propel the offense the next week or so.
You just said Trey Turner's name, and it reminded me that I teased something earlier and I never got back to it. So at the 29:45 mark of this podcast is what I'm going to say. One other option is a guy who's on the 40-man roster is Jacob Amaya, who recently got promoted to AAA and is destroying things at AAA. He's tearing it up. He's an elite defensive shortstop, and he's turned into a very good hitter. Guess what? Trey Turner has experience in the outfield too. And so that could be one of those weird realm of possibility kind of things of Jacob Amaya coming up to play shortstop for the Dodgers and Trey Turner going out to center field and bumping Bellinger over to right or something like that. Like I said when I teased it 10 hours ago, it was not the most likely scenario, but it's not totally crazy because he's already on the 40-man roster.
Yeah, and that's where it would come out. Ideally that's probably like a long-term Betts injury plan, but with him already being on the 40-man, it makes sense in the short term if you need it.
And kind of a tryout for, hey, let's see, since we don't technically have a shortstop under contract next year except Gavin Lux, so let's see what we got.
Yeah, very possible.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff. Anything else before we head out? Oh well, first time at the stadium this year, so
Yeah, if you're
unfortunately I
watching,
lost, but yeah.
yeah, if you're watching, you can see my background. I am not in my office. I'm in my bedroom at my parents' house in Lake Elsinore. I'm here in California. I went to the game on Friday. It was a lot of fun to be back in the stadium, even though the game didn't go well. Probably talk more about that on tomorrow's episode when we talk about the extra inning struggles. But Dodger Stadium, it's my favorite place in the world. Being there with my two sons and even having my brother there couldn't ruin it. It was a lot of fun. Chris Taylor tossed the ball to my younger son, or tossed it to a group of kids, and my son, because he's taller than all the other kids, reached up and grabbed it and was about to feel bad for the kid he reached over until he looked over and saw it was the kid who already had 3 baseballs from the ball girls. So I caught a Justin Turner home run in batting practice. I wish he would hit more of those in real games. And yeah, being back at the stadium, it felt like home. It was weird. It didn't feel like it had been 8 months once I was there, and I can't wait to get back again.
Yeah, that's always great. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Go check out our Ultimate NBA Mock Draft on the Locked On Podcast Network. The first picks have already been made. Search now for the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and get over 50 insiders giving their picks, Odyssey sports experts, the draft experts of Locked On NBA Big Board. It's all there. Just search for Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and make it your second listen of the day. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. You can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vince Samperio. The DMs are open on those accounts. No game tomorrow, so if you have any questions, you can send them to any of those places or just send them to at Locked On Dodgers. We'll find it. Other ways to get a hold of us, email lockedondodgers@gmail.com or voicemail text 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us. When you get in your car or if you're at home, tell your smart device play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.